Okay, welcome to another parents session, this time on applying for residency. And tonight we have Karen Symes, one of our assistant deans, who will go over the process and then answer all of your questions. We have the team here, so in the event that she can't answer a question, we'll just pop in and help. But let's get started with the program. Dr. Symes.
Thank you.
Can you hear?
I can hear. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I'm going to share a slide set. So if you just give me 1 sec, I will get that going.
Just ask them.
I just have to. Sorry, I have everything open.
Yes. There it is.
Great. Can everyone see?
Yes.
Excellent. So as Dean Atman said, I'm one of the assistant deans in the Student Affairs Office, and I'm here to talk to you about the path to residency for our students. And I'm very excited. I thought I'd take a few, maybe 15, 20 minutes to sort of run through some of the major parts of our program and then open it up to questions, because I'm sure that's what most of you really want to hear about. So if I just get started, so we base all of the, hold on, sorry, some things popping up here. All of our activities in the Student Affairs Office around something called PATH. It's an acronym that we use to describe professional identity formation. Is for the P, so that's a big part of the residency application process, and we'll talk a little bit about that. A is advancing to residency through mentoring and advising, and we will talk a lot about that. T is techniques for lifelong learning, resiliency, and wellness, and we do incorporate wellness into all of our residency talks and information sessions, and also human and advocacy. And this obviously plays a large role in our students. They choose Boston University, as you all know, because of the patient population, and really want to develop the aspects of their professional identity. Oops. It's not forwarding, sorry. So we have a 4-year career exploration program, and I know this is very small. It's not really so that you can look at everything. We're going to talk through some of these things as we go through, but it was really to give you an idea that we are on this from the first year. We have lots of things that are actually woven into curriculum time, and on top of that, we have additional events. So the program starts with general skills. And so we really want students to get to know who they are and really determine what they want to do as they go through. I seem to have a bit of an echo here, sorry. So we start off with self-reflection and identification of interest and focus. And that might seem rather sort of nebulous, but in fact, it's a really good idea for students to really think about who they are and what they want to do with their lives. And we know they all want to be physicians, and some of them come in and they know exactly what they want to do. But many of them will change their minds multiple times through medical school. And this sort of continuous process is some way that they can sort of keep track of where they are, and are their interests still the same? Do they want to change? We work on things like CV development, really practical type things. They get to interact with the medical school leadership. Dean Atman has many lunches. All of the associate deans have lunches, but we also have programs where they get to meet the clinical chairs and meet them in an informal environment where they get to really understand what it's like in a certain field, and also the path of the person. And I think this is one of the really powerful things that we do, is because what the students see is that this is not a straight line, and every single person has things that happen to them along the way. And it's really important for them to understand that everyone has a pace of their own, and everyone's journey is their own. And it's really up to the individual and how they shape their career. We also teach them about leadership skills. And of course, one of the big things for everyone, as we all know, is having good mentor relationships. And we sort of assign mentors early on in their careers, but we want to teach them how to identify mentors and how to get the most out of those relationships as well. So once we sort of started on these general skills, we transition into individualized and really dynamic residency counseling and mentorship. And so we always see the sort of backdrop, on the backdrop of the school, there are 3 people who really support one another in this actually. Obviously, one is the student, but we also have a dean in the Office of Student Affairs who will write their medical school performance evaluation, and they work side by side with that student, mostly once they've decided what they want to do, but even before they've really picked a specialty sometimes. And then they also have assigned a field-specific advisor. So if they want to go into internal medicine, for example, they'd be matched with a field-specific advisor who shares their interests. And the 3 of us work together as a team to make sure the student is really ready to apply to residency. We'll do everything, so from practical things like reading personal statements, giving them mock interviews, to sort of supporting them in which programs they apply to. And it's quite intensive for all 3 of us. As I mentioned, we have advisors that are there every step of the way. So as first years, our students are assigned a student affairs dean, and they also participate in the Academy of Medical Educators. And each of them have an academy advisor who not only teaches them doctoring, but they are a very valuable resource. They do not grade the students, and so they're there for their professional development and to support them through the first 3 years of medical school, but they're also unofficially doing it the entire time, honestly. Then when students start to think, oh, I know what I want to do, they choose a field-specific advisor. And they do that during their 3rd year. And they work with that field-specific advisor throughout the rest of the residency application process. Now, one of the things that's interesting is you might think, well, what happens if my student changes their mind and they thought they wanted to be a surgeon and now they want to do something else? But we switch their field-specific advisor for them if they change their career goals. So it's not like they're stuck with one person, they can change as needed. And some students do apply to things that are programs that have 2 components. So for example, internal medicine and psychiatry, there are a few programs like that. And in those cases, they'll get a field-specific advisor in each field. As I mentioned, there's also a dean in the Office of Student Affairs who writes a letter for them. And this is a letter of evaluation. It's known as the MSPE. And this is a letter that really summarizes their medical school career. It's not a letter of recommendation. It's really a letter that is a evaluation, highlights their strengths, and includes all their clerkship evaluations. So it's a very important letter. And the students get to see this before it's submitted. So I know I showed you that very busy diagram early on. I just wanted to talk to you about some of the program highlights that we have. So everything here, M1 is the 1st year, M4 is the 4th year. And we start in M1, we have student activities fair. And there are over 100 extracurricular activities and clubs that students can join. Everything from service learning to fun, things like hiking and outdoors activities, but also things like professional things like career interest groups and advocacy groups and things like that. So there are lots of things that students can do to really fill out their applications, even from the 1st year. As I mentioned, we have things like Meet the Chairs, where the students get to interact in a very informal setting. It's over pizza with the chairs of the clinical departments, and they speak to each other about their journeys, what went right, what went wrong, things like that. And that's really nice for the students to see that some of the chairs have, failures on their transcripts and things like that, but yet they can overcome those and become very, very successful. And also we have field-specific advisors, as I mentioned, and they get those in the 3rd year, but available to the first 2-year students, we have field-specific advisor leads. And those are volunteer clinical faculty in specific fields that students have access to throughout the first 2 years, just to ask questions about what it's like and things like that. There's also physician shadowing, and students can do that in any year. There's a website where they can sign up for shadowing opportunities in many different fields. And that's a really nice way for students to dip their toe into a pool of a specific specialty. So if they are interested in, one specialty over another, they can try a little bit just before they even start their clinical rotations. We also have a series called The Practical Aspects of Practicing Medicine. Again, that's open to all students. And these are themed panel discussions that address what it means to be a physician, what it's like financially, what it's like to work with disadvantaged patients. And they're fairly frequent. There are about 4 of those a year, so that students could go to them if they wish. We also have practical things like CV workshops, and those are led by faculty, and they get real-time feedback on a draft of their CV. And we also have career exploration activities where we have a career expo that's open to the first 2-year students, and they can come and speak to the program directors, so the people who run the residency programs at Boston Medical Center, about different fields. And that's really fun. It's done a bit like speed dating, where students can visit different specialties and talk to people. They can also interact with various offices in the university as well, so they can learn about what it's like to be a physician educator and things like that. So as the program starts off in the first 2 years, and we really start with practical things. How do you decide what you're interested in? How do you create a good portfolio and things like that? Whereas as we get through to the 3rd year of medical school and 4th year, when the residency applications are due, we start to really hone down on the students' actual specific career goals. And so we have some events for those as well. So the Associate Dean of Students, Dean Jackson, she meets with every single student in the 4th year to give us support, advice, feedback. She does mock interviews and all sorts of things. And students have reported that's really helpful, because they have someone that they know well, but not so well that she doesn't have that she can give them the big picture. Also, there's a career fair, and again, this is one where students get to meet the residency program directors, and they, again, can speed date if they're not sure on which specialty they're still sort of thinking about, get a taste for subspecialties, things like that. And they really, again, get to interact with the program directors and figure out what it means to work as a specific physician. So, for example, a surgeon, or an ophthalmologist, or a dermatologist, or a family medicine doc, or a pediatrician. We have class meetings throughout all 4 years, and these include all aspects of career development, including how to apply for residency. We also have personal statement workshops, so we run those through student affairs, and many departments also have those as well now. We also give a mock interview, at least one, to every student, and we really want to do that because, as we all know, sometimes when you interview for something, the first time something comes out of your mouth, it might not sound quite as good as it did in your head. So we want to make sure they're all prepared and relaxed when they go to their interviews, and realize that they really do know what they're doing. And then we also want to talk to them a bit about licensure. So the Massachusetts Board of Registration in Medicine come and talk to students about next steps. So once they match, they have to apply for a provisional medical license. And this is a sort of a talk to get them to think about the sorts of things that they need to consider when doing that. So as you can tell, there's a lot of advising. We advise, we advise, we advise, we advise, and we all really enjoy doing it. So I think it might be nice to see a little data, and I realize this is quite a busy slide, But I just wanted to give you a view of what the match results look like. So this is for the 2024 data. So the students who matched last year, and this is from the American Association of Medical Colleges. They publish this every year. And on the x-axis, you can see all the different specialties. And on the y-axis, you can see the percent of students US seniors who matched into those specialties. And some, you can tell, are more competitive. So this bar is the 75th match rate. And so for certain specialties such as dermatology, neurological surgery, orthopedic surgery, and plastic surgery, the match rate can be below that. So some students who apply into those things, we have to give additional care to, because we want to make sure that they apply to appropriate programs based on their portfolio and that they are successful. Another thing that's something students now consider is geographic signaling. So you can choose in the main residency match 3 regions or no geographic preference. So some students choose no geographic preference because they really want to cast a wide net and they don't want to limit their sort of competitiveness in a certain regions. But others get to pick 3. Now the divisions are made based on census data, and the different divisions are shown here in different colors. So we can see that the Pacific regions, including Washington, Oregon, California, Alaska, and Hawaii, are colored in light blue. Then we have the mountain regions in yellow, West, North, Central in pink, the sort of West, South, Central in a sort of orange, a dark orange for East, North, Central. East, South, Central is in light green. Mid-Atlantic is dark pink, New England in orange again, and then sort of a light purple for the Mid-Atlantic. Now, certain regions of the country are more competitive than others. For the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic and the Pacific are the 3 most competitive regions. But there are many programs in those regions, and many students match very successfully into those regions. Now, most students apply through ERAS, and that's run by the American Association of Medical Colleges, and that's the majority of applications. But more and more residencies are going through slightly different application portals now. So the American Urological Association have urology applications. The San Francisco Match have plastic surgery and ophthalmology. The ACOG is for the obstetrics and gynecology. The military have their own application portal, as do the Canadians, which is CARMS. So there are many different portals, and those will probably change over the next several years, as the ACOG was brand new this year. We have lots of resources, and this is just a little taste of some of them. We have a career exploration guide that's available to the student. We have our advising network. We provide templates for things like CVs, and there's also a big program through the AAMC, Careers in Medicine, and there's a ton of information on their website. And there, if you're interested, you can look around. Their website is aamc.org, and they're a really rich resource. It can be a bit overwhelming going on there, to be honest. So I would like to acknowledge the people who do all of this work, which is the Student Affairs Office led by Angela Jackson, who's the Associate Dean, and my fellow Assistant Deans, Dan Chen, Ricky Cruz, Paige Curran, Vivian Sanchez, and Bob Vinci, and our fabulous staff, led by Nicole Ciccarelli. Susan Norris is our Senior Policy Officer, and she is the person who uploads all of the medical student evaluation letters. Tiffany Wong, she works with our students on well-being and advising, and Roisha Young works on our students on pretty much everything. So I thought I didn't want to take too long to do that because I really wanted to spend some time seeing what your questions were. And I did get a few ahead of time. So I can either take questions now or start with the questions that were already submitted.
Why don't you start with the questions you've got, Karen?
Okay, I'm going to exit the screen share now. Is that a good idea? Oh, there we go. Excellent. So the questions I was given. So the first question was, excited to hear about this process and what happens after match day. So I didn't really speak about that. So our students all apply for residencies, and then the long process begins of interview selection, and then they submit a rank list. And then they're matched into a program. And I can talk more about that if you're interested. But after match day, when they find out where they're going, they can, a lot happens. One thing that happens is they all have to finish their requirements to graduate. So we want to make sure they really do graduate on time and everything goes smoothly. But the other thing they get to do is the programs reach out to them. They start helping them with their license. They have to apply for a medical license. They have to find somewhere to live. So there's a lot of activities like that after post-match. And a lot of them, if they're lucky, have managed to time things well, managed to build some vacation in. So some of them try and get a vacation in there because they know going into residency is going to be quite a lot of work again. And I'm happy to elaborate on any of that. Next question, how can parents access medical school grades? Unfortunately, parents cannot access medical school grades. They're protected by a law called FERPA. You may have heard of it previously. It's the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. And parents up until the age of 18 have a right to see their students' academic records. After they turn 18 or they go to anything other than higher than high school, that law now protects the student. So the student is the one who can access their record. Next question. Is there an option to select the state in which the residency is to be served? So yes and no. So as I mentioned, students can choose 3 regions as their signals. So they can, in their application, say, I want to signal California or Pacific, Northeast, Mid-Atlantic. But that doesn't mean they cannot apply to residencies in other states. They can, but things work well when they signal different regions and then they have programs within those regions that they apply to. Those tend to be the best likelihood for matches. Unfortunately, you can't specify a specific state, just a region. Also, you may not get the match in the state that you want. That just sometimes happens. But what we hope is that students find a match that suits them. And sometimes they won't even know until they get there that match is the right match for them. And just to give you an example, recently, one of our clinical chairs spoke about her match process. And she spoke about how she was being really solicited by a very highly ranked program. And they told her she was their top candidate and everything like that. And so she put them first, but she didn't match there. And it was devastating for her. And she matched at another program. And she has said, and I believe her because she's very honest, that was the best thing that ever happened to her, because she ended up in a program where they were really supportive, really kind. She was able to develop her career in a way that she never would have been able to in this other place because they gave her so much support. And she actually went to the original place for her fellowship, which is after residency, and then came back to the place she did her residency as a faculty because she just loved it so much. And then now she's at BU. And she came here for many reasons, including our wonderful patients. But I think it can be disappointing in the moment if you don't land in the state you want to land in. But you can always, always go there for your job later in your career. The key is to make the absolute best you can of your residency, learn as much as you can, become the best resident and doctor you can be, so that you give yourself options to go forward next time. I hope that wasn't too depressing. Next question. My son just sent in his residency application. What happens next and how does it work? Well, that's quite a tough question, because the one thing that has to happen is waiting quite often. So once the residency applications are submitted, the programs get access to them. And it takes some time for programs to go through the residency applications and choose who they would like to invite for interview. Some interviews are going to be online, and that has happened ever since COVID. So Zoom interviews are still very common, but now more programs and certain residencies and specialties have decided that in-person interviews work better. So there's a slightly different strategy if you have to travel somewhere for your interview versus doing it on Zoom. So obviously, if you're doing it on Zoom, you can do it at home. We provide rooms in the school. If students don't have a quiet place, they can give their do their interviews. And they can do it fairly cheaply if it's on Zoom. If they have to travel, they have to plan in travel time as well. Many of the residencies have social events surrounding the interview as well. So students get to see the program better, get to meet the residents, decide what they want. Once they have interviews, they get mock interviews here. So either their field-specific advisor and always a student affairs dean will give student mock interview. Some departments give students a sort of interview day for BMC, and they will sort of give them feedback on their interviews afterwards. So they tend to be fairly early. Sometimes students, have trouble planning how to schedule their interviews, but we're always here to help them. And programs try as best they can to accommodate students. It's not always possible. Sometimes a student gets offered an interview in 2 places on the same day, and then they have to decide. But usually there's a workaround if we can find it.
Karen, I think I'm going to jump now to some of the questions that people have been submitting.
Oh, okay,
So I'll just read them to you and you can respond. The
Okay.
first is MSPE recommendation letter based on only M3 performance or on M1 to M3 performance?
It's based on all 4 years. Well, 3 years actually. So the way the grades are on the transcript, but it starts with an area called noteworthy characteristics, in which the student gets to put 3 bullets of things that are most meaningful to them. And so they can have things from the first and second year in there as well. And then there are statements about first and second year being pass-fail. And then most of the rest of the letter is about the summary parts of their evaluations from the clerkships.
And how do you help evaluate the potential for a competitive match?
That's quite challenging. So students often worry that maybe their step score wasn't what they wanted, or they didn't have enough this or enough that. It's a really individualized process. So from years of experience, we know what good profiles look like for students in different residencies. And we do a lot of work with the field-specific advisors around that, because they know their fields very well. So we do a lot of advising about, let's take a look at the programs, what's available, what do you want out of your career, and try and decide what's a good sort of situation for them. If a student really wants to apply to something super competitive, but they're transcript isn't quite as shiny as certain programs would like, or things like that, we try and often talk to them about alternatives. So if this doesn't work out for you, what can we do to help you? And so there's a lot of advising around these, and it's very difficult to be specific on that, but you know, we've become pretty good at it actually as a team. We all have different expertise. We all, you know, seek advice from one another as well. If we have a student who has fabulous everything, but their step score wasn't quite as good as they wanted, which programs are the best ones for them to apply to? Where are they going to thrive? Because what we want is our students to go out and find the best match for them, where they can thrive and become fabulous physicians.
And next question, what is the usual number of applications per student, and why are there so many applications now?
So that there is no average, because unfortunately every specialty is a bit different. But one of the reasons the applications increased is because the number of residency spots did not increase as at the same rate as the number of applicants, because now we have other students in the match. So MD seniors, which are all your children, but also doctors of osteopathy and foreign medical graduates, which we always had. So the number of, in particular, DO schools has increased dramatically. So it has made the pool of people applying to residencies larger than the number of spots. However, of those categories, the senior MDs have the best percentage match among all. But that's why the number of applications, and unfortunately, the more competitive the specialty, usually the higher number of applications the students need. For certain primary care specialties, you don't need quite as many, but it's huge for some of them.
And then this is a related question, I think. What is the match rate for BU students?
Honestly, I don't know that off the top of my head. I do think that it has been very successful. If students don't match, we have a plan for each and every student who doesn't match. Sometimes it's reconsidering which specialty. Sometimes it's deciding to stay an additional year to improve their portfolio or explore other other specialties. Some decide to do a dual degree and then reapply. So there's lots of plans for students who don't match. It looks like Karen Antman was going to say something now.
Yeah, with respect to the match rate, basically, there are some students who want dermatology or orthopedics. Those are very competitive residencies. And if they don't get in the first year, they'll do a year of research and then they reapply and usually get in. So that if you don't count them, and in fact, that would be maybe two a class. Usually by the end of a secondary match, we have one or two students who don't match. Usually the students who have taken the advice and applied for a variety of residencies, from ones that are a stretch to ones that would be safeties, have no trouble getting in. They land somewhere. The ones that the ones where we have issues are when their statistics, their grades, their scores don't add up to getting into a residency like orthopedics, but they persist in having only orthopedics and they don't put down, say, surgery. Because basically if they put orthopedics at the top, if they match in orthopedics, I'll get it. We ask them to put then the second most favorable specialty. So if they don't match in orthopedics, maybe they'll match in surgery. But if they don't do that, sometimes they don't match. And then they, again, will do a year of research and then try to recompete.
Okay, so next question. Do programs still occasionally go outside the match process and agree to rank you if you rank them?
They're not supposed to. But sometimes they say that, and that is not appropriate. So
Okay.
what we say to our students is take it with a grain of salt. If, maybe they mean it and they're going to match you if they say they're going to match you, but it doesn't always ring true. So don't put all your eggs in one basket. You can rank them wherever you like. You should always rank your programs in the order that you would like to go to them. But you have to sometimes brace yourself that maybe they didn't quite tell you the truth. And that's sad.
Word of warning. Are students able to have elective rotations outside BU in a specific hospital that the student might be interested in doing their residency at to help the chances of matching in that particular program?
They absolutely can. There's several programs, but one is called VSLO. I'm sure if you mention this to your student, they would know what you're talking about. They could apply to away rotations. Some specialties absolutely require away rotations. So emergency medicine, orthopedics, some of those, they absolutely want aways. We do caution students a little bit about certain aways, and it's only because you're in an interview for 4 weeks. So you can go, but if you go, you better be on your game. So what we always suggest is that students do a rotation at BMC first in a specific specialty, so they learn the ropes before they go away. But you just have to bear in mind that sometimes aways are not always all they're cracked up to be. So you have to be a bit careful about it.
I'm not sure if you'll know the answer to this question, Karen, but what is the match rate for urology in 2023?
2023.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I do know that the students I was working with matched in their urology spots. But usually we only have a couple of students and we don't always know who students are applying to what thing. So we tend to look at so each of us work with a group of students specifically. And even though we're there for advice for any of them, we get to know our little bunch much better. So, and I come to think of it, 2023, I had an advisee who was matching and did match, but I do not know the exact results for urology for that.
Fair enough. Matching is applied in M3 or M4 year. It's M4, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, that question I think you answered. My son insists the interviews are all online. How many are likely to be in person? And how do you know?
So most of them, it depends on the specialty. So if the students probably have been told by their field specific advisors if their interviews are likely to be online or not. So if a student's been told they're online, they're probably online in that specific specialty.
Very good. How many interviews do applicants usually get? And is there a way to time them in terms of most desired?
So I would say that we like it if students have 12 programs to rank. So we'd like them to have 12 if they can. Some specialties, the super competitive ones, you may not get that. But it might not be a bad thing. But for the big general ones like surgery, internal medicine, we prefer if students have 12 because that's almost a guaranteed match. How do they time them? I would honestly say do not do your top choice first, just so you get a bit of practice and you relax into it. Because residency interviews are not like job interviews. They're usually looking for, like, once they interview you, they've decided you match them academically. So what they're looking for is colleagues. So do you match the program? Do you have the things they're looking for in that program? Do they want to spend time with you? And different programs have different ideas about what that means. So there's somewhere for everyone. But to rank, I would say don't be afraid to put an interview in January. And the reason I say that is because everyone sort of stacks their interviews early on because they're concerned. But in January, you can really shine because everyone else is exhausted. So if you're interviewing in January and you're really upbeat and pleasant and wonderful, then you will really stand out. So, and it doesn't matter whether you interview in your top program first or last, you have as long as you are still up and able to do the interview, you have a good chance. Many of our students actually match in their last interview.
Okay, good
That's
tips.
anecdotally, but it's true.
January.
Yeah.
So how does the grade that students get on their board exam play into the residency program? My son said there are cutoffs with the residency and grade on the exam.
So unfortunately, program directors are very cagey about that. And so we don't really know what the cutoffs are, or if there are indeed cutoffs. We assume that some programs that are very competitive or some residency types that are very competitive do have cutoffs. But I'm not sure that they're hard and fast. I think people try and look at applications holistically more now than they did before. But the word is out that there are cutoffs, but we never know what they are. They will never tell us, unfortunately, because that would make advising a lot easier.
Very good. When and how long can students take a vacation after match, but before the residency starts?
Well, if they planned well, they could probably get about 8 weeks. Because in 4th year, they have quite a bit of flexibility because of things like you need to go on it, you need to go on residency interviews, you need to do away sometimes, and not all school curricula line up with each other. So sometimes you need 2 blocks of time at BU to do one away, which is a bit unfortunate, but they usually manage to fit things around those. But if you were lucky and all the stars aligned, you could probably take a couple of blocks off, and each block is 4 weeks.
Very good. I don't know if this is another tricky one. What is the match rate for radiology?
Well, I did have it on that slide. Hold on, let me have a look. I have it printed out here, so I can take a quick peek. If I only had got good eyesight.
And we can always get back to folks after this
Okay.
session, which is
Yeah.
recorded, by the way.
Oh, it is.
So
Okay. Well, I will take a look and let you know. But it's on that slide.
Okay.
Yeah,
So please comment on gold and silver signaling and how much does that matter?
Okay. So for certain residencies, there are, in addition to the regional signals for programs. And each residency type has its own number. Some are just, you get 5 and that's it. But some have what they call gold signals and silver signals. So you might have, for example, 3 gold and 5 silver, something like that. And programs that get signaled in your geographic preference, often that's your best chance of getting an interview out of it. But the silver signals are also very important as well, so don't discount them. What I would suggest for students is don't signal, like say if you are applying to internal medicine, say, NYU gets more internal medicine applicants than anyone else. So unless you're extremely competitive for NYU, we would suggest not wasting a signal on them because the odds are not so great. But what we do have, and one of the things that's wonderful about the field-specific advisors, is they know a lot of programs that you might not necessarily even know about that are really fantastic. And sometimes it's worth using, say, 1 gold signal on a program like that where you will really explore and find a place where you'd fit nicely. So we usually try and tell people to, go for your favorite reach, pick something in the middle, and pick not the safety, because there's no such thing really in some specialties, but pick one of the less competitive ones to give your signals to, because you don't want to just signal just top 10 programs just in case, because you really want to match in your specialty.
Very good. Is FSA an attending from the same specialty as the student's area of interest?
Yes. So usually, there are a couple of specialties that we don't have at BMC, Boston Medical Center. And so those FSAs are not in the specialty usually, but they're specialty adjacent, which sounds really weird. But for example, we don't have a specialty called PMNR, which is the rehab specialty. So we have connections with someone at another, well, they're affiliated with us, but they're not at BMC. And so we have a field specific advisor there, but we also have a physician at BMC who maybe does something in family medicine that's rehabilitation connected or something like that, so that you get more advice that way. But every specialty that we have at BMC have people for students interested in that specialty.
Very good. Let me see. Does it matter how many clubs a student participates in and as an M1? And does that make an impact on their evaluation?
I would say quality over quantity is always important. So rather than be in lots and lots of clubs and just go and do things, a few things, it's better to invest in a couple. Maybe it's always good to be in a career interest group, even if you change your mind. So if you're in ophthalmology to start with, but you end up applying into another specialty, that's okay. But I would say, pick something that's advocacy related if that's your interest, or pick something business related if that's your interest, but pick something that really means something to you, that you can develop and speak knowledgeably, knowledgeably about when you go to your interviews. So I would pick less rather than more, because the trouble is we have over 100, so it's really hard to narrow yourself down when you're a student. So, but quality over quantity, I would say.
Good advice. Here's another tricky one. Are BU students very competitive on the West Coast, or are their chances much better on the East Coast?
They're competitive everywhere, honestly.
Yeah.
We have great students. I mean, it all sounds so doom and gloom, but honestly, our students are phenomenal. They make great physicians. When they go to away sites, they're always amazed at how skilled they are compared to some other schools. So even schools in town that like to think they're better than us.
Very good.
But yes, our students are fabulous. So it is competitive, but our students don't have any problem matching on the West Coast.
So questions regarding the cost. Do you pay to apply to a residency program? Is it like medical school where there's a preliminary application and then a secondary application?
I don't know that you have to pay for the secondaries, but unfortunately some programs have decided on secondary applications now, and so students are filling those in as we speak. But there's a cost to applications. There's a certain price up to 30, and then there's another price over 30 programs. That changes yearly. This year it actually dropped for the first time, is my knowledge. But anytime you want to look that up, you can find that on aamc.org.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
On average, how many BU students are matched in the Northeast region?
Oh, that's a good question. We actually do match a lot of students in the Northeast because, it's home to many of them, or it's become home as they've lived here for quite a long time. I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but it's high. I would guess a third. Karen Atman might know the answer to that, but
a lot of students apply for residencies in the Northeast, correct?
Yes, a lot. Yeah.
So going back to being interviewed in January, can you assume that that residency program still has spots, or do they make selections as they go?
So I think every program is making a running list as they go, but it's not like medical school. So if you cast your minds back to the medical school, you had to apply right on the first day, because if you didn't, all the interview spots would go. It doesn't work the same way for residency. So with residency, they are interviewing people that they want to interview and that think are a good match for their program, and they don't make their list until after the residency's interviews are over. They probably have a running list in their head of who's their favorite, and they move people up and down depending on who comes after them, but they don't submit any lists. There's no rolling list. They don't submit that until, I think it's in February for the ERAS applications, and there are some early matches, and they are in January, I believe. And then the students, so then the programs put theirs in first, and then the students afterwards. So
there was a great question that came in earlier that I wanted to get to before we run out of time. What can parents do to support their medical student on their residency application?
honestly, be there and listen to them. It's so hard, I think, to not always, if you're like me, you always have an opinion, and, it's really hard sometimes to keep that to yourself. But sometimes it really helps the student if you just listen to them, let them complain or commiserate with them if they don't get the interviews they want. Just support them, listen to them, help them. If they ask for your advice, obviously give some advice. But it's hard. I think all of medical school, as parents, you all deserve a round of applause, because honestly, it's one of the toughest things to do, is to watch your child go through something really challenging. And medical school is very challenging, and the match process is very stressful. But
So I see that the dean just put in the chat the map of last year's match. It's kind of
lovely.
small. I wonder if we can make that bigger.
Well, we could probably put it in a slide at some point. Right?
Yeah, or at any rate, folks can look at it in the chat. Let me
Oh, if you
see.
double click on it, it comes up big.
Yeah, it'll come up on another screen. It came up on another screen for me.
Mm-hmm.
So folks can certainly take a look at that, and that'll give you the exact numbers for each state. Would you ever get feedback after the interview so you can rank? Maybe you think you did well, but not them.
It's unusual for programs to give feedback. You usually get feedback from BMC. They're usually really good about that. So you can tweak your interview strategy going forward. We give mock interviews so we can help students hone in on their interview techniques, skills, answers, things like that. But it's not that, you usually get a feel for it, but it's really, you can't be 100% certain how it went, I think.
Karen, I was just asked to share the screen. There's the map. Can you see it?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. So I don't know if you want to comment at all on the map.
Well, as you can see, the Northeast is very popular. Oh, it just disappeared.
It did?
Hmm.
Oh, let me see. Did it come back?
No.
Well,
Oh,
There
back.
it is. It's back.
okay, great.
So California and Florida are other big spots. Usually we have more people in Chicago than 6, but that's Illinois. You can see Philadelphia with University of Pennsylvania and the other medical schools in Philadelphia. That's Pennsylvania. New York City has Cornell, Columbia, NYU, Mount Sinai. So lots of places to go there. So Massachusetts has us, the Harvard hospitals, UMass. You can kind of see the distribution.
11 in California.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah, a lot go to California.
Yeah.
They're going home in many cases.
Yeah.
So there you go. And it is in the chat if anyone wants to take a closer look.
Yeah, you can just drag it off onto your desktop. If you drag it
Yeah.
off to your desktop, you have it.
So there is a unique family story for each student. As parents, are we getting a chance to share an authentic story about our sons and daughters?
Not unless your student wants to incorporate it into their application. Their application is theirs. You know,
That makes sense.
that's just a conversation with your student.
And is BU considered a top-tier school? I would imagine we consider ourselves to be a top-tier school. I have read that some competitive programs mainly consider students from top-tier schools. Thank you. Karen, you want to comment on that one? Karen, Dean Etman?
We actually keep tabs on the number of our students that didn't get into Harvard hospitals, Cornell, Columbia, UCSF, Mayo Clinic. Basically, the number of residencies is so many across the country that the students' chances of getting into a very competitive residency program are reasonably good, assuming that they had decent grades and a good board score.
How can you tell if a residency program likes you after the interview if they may not be honest that they will rank you?
You don't.
You don't. Exactly. Sometimes, and now certain residencies have a situation where there is no communication after the interview from either. The student can ask questions about specific things, but the program have said specifically they will not communicate with you. And that's to try and stop this, we're going to rank you first if we're not situation.
And finally, do interview requests come around the same time to allow for travel and planning?
We wish they did. Some residencies now do have a release date for their interviews. And so it makes it much easier to sort of plan when you're going to go where, or when you're going to give your interview. But that's not the case for every specialty, unfortunately. We wish it were.
So we have hit our time, and it actually looks like we've gotten through the questions. We have been recording this session, and we will be sending it out. Dr. Symes, Dr. Antman, any final words for our parents?
I would say you have fantastic children who are going to make brilliant physicians. And as someone who's starting to get a bit older, I'm really happy about that. No, we really love them and want the best for them.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Thank you so much.
Goodbye.
Take care.